Recording. So good evening, guys. Good evening, everyone. So in the previous session, I covered like what are the different types of testing, and we also had an assessment, right? Now in today's session, I want to cover like waterfall model and what is application architecture, what is meant by application architecture, and what is 2-tier and what is 3-tier architecture. Okay, so these would be the concepts for today. All right. Now, so let's first let me explain what is waterfall model. Okay, so we already discussed SDLC, right? Software development lifecycle, isn't it? We already discussed what is how does a typical SDLC looks like. So this is how a typical SDLC looks like. It starts with requirement analysis, design, implementation, testing, and evaluation. Evaluation means nothing but making the application go live. That is called as evaluation, right? Once the application testing is completed, right? So making the application go live is called as evaluation. Now, let's understand what is waterfall model, right? So if you observe here, the software development, so it starts with conception or initiation, right? Conception or initiation, and then if you want to elaborate the SDLC, right? So it starts with conception and initiation and analysis. Analysis means like requirement analysis over here, and then comes design phase and then construction phase. Construction phase is nothing but development phase. Okay, and then comes testing phase. Once in waterfall model, right? Please remember that waterfall model is suitable only for very small projects. Okay, and nowadays most of the projects are following agile methodology. Most of the projects are not following waterfall model, and waterfall model is particularly suitable for only very small projects. All right, and where requirements are understood well in advance. Okay, so and now what is the disadvantage of waterfall? I just now mentioned that most of the projects are not following this waterfall methodology nowadays, isn't it? Now let's understand why is it so? Why waterfall model is not preferred or not followed nowadays, right? First thing is it is not suitable for complex projects and large projects. It's suitable only for very small applications. See, when I say projects, small applications like small web applications and small mobile applications. Okay, so it's not suitable for complex applications because in waterfall model, each phase starts after the previous phase is completed. Means only when analysis phase is completed, design phase will be started. Only after completing the design phase, construction development phase will start. And importantly, only after the software is developed, testing will be carried out. Right? Now, what is the problem with this is, in testing phase, if there are any defects found in the testing phase, right? So by the time the development is completed, the project development is completed to the full extent. And now if there are any defects identified at this stage, right, it will be very costly to fix those defects. Cost of fixing the defects will be high in waterfall model, and it's not suitable for medium to complex applications. Is it clear for everyone, guys?
Yes, sir.
Why the cost of defect fixing will be high here? Because in this phase, in this model, testing will be started only after development is completed, right? And if there are any defects identified at this stage, it will be very costly to fix those defects because the whole construction or whole development of the project is completed by that time. So it will be very costly to fix the defects. That is one major reason why waterfall model is not followed nowadays. Okay, clear, guys?
Sir.
And to overcome this, so these are the disadvantages of waterfall model, and to overcome this, we have agile methodology nowadays. Most of the projects are following agile methodology. Okay, now we will discuss what is that agile methodology once we complete with the tools, right? Now for now, remember that like waterfall model is no more followed, and most of the projects are not following this waterfall model, right? Now let's discuss like what is meant by application architecture. The next concept is what application architecture. Okay, so architecture means pictorial representation of an application's components right? Components, server, and connections, right? Application architecture means pictorial representation of an application's components, software, and connections. When I say components, any application, any web application, you take redbus.in or icsabank.com or hdfcbank.com, right? So mostly they will be having this web server, application server, database server, and you'll have a load balancer and all this. So this is the typical three-tier architecture application architecture. This is the architecture diagram for a typical three-tier architecture application. Is it clear, guys? Whether you take any application like, IRCTC or icsabank.com or hdfcbank.com or amazon.in, right? The typical architecture will be something like this. It will be having a web server, application server, database server, and there will be something called load balancer. We will discuss what. So load balancer, the name itself says that it balances the user load. Let's assume that there are thousands and lakhs of users who are accessing the application through different browsers, and the user load will be balanced. And in this diagram, there are three web servers. Okay, there are three web servers. The load balancer equally distributes the load equally between all the servers. Clear? Guys, understood or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So, and again, there are 4 application servers and 3 database servers. So I'll explain soon what is this web server, what is application server, and what is database server. Okay. So first, let's understand what is meant by architecture. Why is this important is in the interviews, they will ask you, what can you explain your project architecture, current project architecture? So you should know what is meant by architecture, and you should know your application architecture. మీ రీసెంట్ అప్లికేషన్ అంటే లైక్ రెజ్యూమ్లో వాట్ ఎవర్ యూ కీప్ యాజ్ ద లేటెస్ట్ ప్రాజెక్ట్, రైట్? దే మే ఆస్క్ యూ టు డ్రా ద అప్లికేషన్ ఆర్కిటెక్చర్ డయాగ్రామ్. ఓకే, సో యూ షుడ్ నో ఫస్ట్ వాట్ ఈస్ మెant బై ఆర్కిటెక్చర్. ఆర్కిటెక్చర్ మీన్స్ a pictorial representation of an application's components, software, and connections. And architecture diagram helps us to understand how those applications interact with each other to meet your business or user requirements. Is the statement clear? First of all, applications components. We know the meaning of components. Components general meaning is parts, different parts, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
And each application consists of web server, app server, database server, and there are connections in between, right? Connections in between, right? So if you represent the applications components, software, and connections, that is called as an architecture diagram. Is it clear, guys?
What is mean by pictorial?
Pictorial representation means in the form of a picture.
Okay.
Right? Now, this architecture diagram helps us to understand how these servers interact with each other to meet the business or user requirements. Right? So how the, when if you send a request from browser to server, right? So how does the servers respond to that request? How does the processing happens? So this architecture diagram helps us to understand that. Clear, guys? When you are sending a request, say amazon.in or gmail.com from the browser, right? So if you know the architecture diagram, so architecture diagram helps us to understand how is your request processed, right? How is your request process? What are the different servers for this Amazon application and all this? Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now, what is meant by a server here? A server means it is a software or a computer program or a hardware, right? So very simple interview question. So when they say like, if you say like, let's say for example, interviewer asks you, can you explain your application architecture? And you say that my web server is Apache HTTP, right? This is my architecture. I have 3 web servers, 4 application servers, and 3 database servers. The next question they may ask is, what is meant by a server? Right? What is meant by a server? A server means it can be a software or a hardware which understands your request process your request and sends back the response. Clear? Which understands your request and process your request means understand your request means suppose you are typing Amazon.in, you are sending a request to the server for Amazon page. So this is called as HTTP request, HTTPS request actually. Observe here, the protocol is HTTPS. Okay, so I'll explain what is meant by protocol. Okay, for now remember that when you are typing Amazon.in, you are sending a request to the server, or when you are typing gmail.com, you are sending a request to Gmail server. Clear case? If you are sending ICS, you are typing ICSAbank.com, you are sending a request, HTTPS request to ICICI Bank servers. Clear case?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, what is a server? It is a software or a computer program or hardware which understands your request, process your request, and sends back the response. What is the response that we got here? This is the response that we got from ICSAbank.com server. In the same way, this is the response that we got from Gmail server. And in the same way, if you type Amazon.in, you are sending a request, HTTPS request to Amazon. And this is the response you got from the Amazon server. Clear, guys?
Yes.
So server is a software or a computer program or a hardware which understands your request, processes your request, sends back the response. Is everyone clear over here?
Yes, sir.
Now let's see what are the different types of architecture we have, right? So the first one in this diagram is a 2-tier architecture and the other one is a 3-tier architecture, right? So let me give some examples for this. All the browser-based applications fall under this 3-tier architecture. All the browser-based applications like IE or Chrome, whatever applications we can access from a browser, right? So those fall under 3-tier architecture. Okay. And whatever applications you have to install on your machine, those fall under this 2-tier architecture. Is it clear or confusing?
Yes, a little bit confusion.
Little bit confusing, right? So let me give some example. So how are you guys joining the meeting, Zoom meeting? Through a browser, or did you install Zoom client on your machine?
Zoom application.
Install.
Right. Most of you might have installed Zoom client on your machine. Yes or no?
Yeah.
Right. So if you install any application on your machine and access some application, use some application, right? So that falls under 2-tier architecture. So here you install Zoom meeting on your machine, right? And that Zoom meeting client might be developed in C++ or .NET or Java, one of these programming languages. Okay, and that will directly communicate with the server. Whereas all the browser-based applications, see, you can join Zoom meeting from browser as well. Okay, so if you don't have Zoom meeting installed on your machine, right, you can go to this link zoom.us in browser and click on this join a meeting. Sorry, not sign in. Yeah, you can click on join a meeting and you can enter the meeting ID here 869. This is our meeting ID, right? 404-9318. You can enter the meeting ID and click on join here. Without installing Zoom meeting, you can join from the browser also. Then this becomes, this falls under this 3-tier architecture. So whenever you are accessing any application through a browser, right, that falls under 3-tier architecture. Or this is also called as thin client. Can you note it down, those who are taking running notes?
Yes, sir.
Let me start one document for you, batch. Okay, Word document where I will be giving the running notes is. Okay. So we came across one new term called thin client, isn't it? Thin client. So what is meant by thin client, guys? Browser-based applications are called as thin client applications. Browser-based applications. Okay. Whereas the opposite one is thick client. Thick client means desktop applications. desktop applications are called as thick client applications. Okay. For instance, when we install Zoom meeting, right? So we are using a desktop application. Why we call that as a desktop application? We installed that software on our machine, right? Those machines are called as desktop applications or thick client applications. For example, if you are using Teams or if you are using any of these tools like WhatsApp and all this, right? Then these are called as desktop applications. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Or thick client, they are also called as thick client. Why they are called as thick client means when we install the application on our machine, right, they will occupy a lot of CPU, memory, disk space, right? That's why they are called as thick client applications. Clear, guys? Whereas, if you are using browser based application, right? So browser you won't install for any specific application, isn't it? So you can access any application from the browser. So that's why this is called as a thin client application. Browser based applications are called as thin client applications. Very important entry question. What is the difference? What is meant by thick client and thin client? Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now,
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
now observe here in browser based applications, right? You are seeing something like application server, IIS, Apache, Nginx, right? We'll discuss this later, guys. So what is application server? I need to explain you what is meant by application server, web server, and all this, which I will cover in the next slide. And what is meant by database server, right? So this is a traditional 3-tier architecture. This is the traditional architecture of a 3-tier application, right? So if you observe here, users may access, as an end user, some users may be using Edge browser. Right now, Internet Explorer is replaced with Edge browser, right? And or Firefox or Chrome, isn't it? You know all those browsers, right?
Yes, sir.
So this one is this one. What is this browser is?
Google Chrome.
Google Chrome and
Chrome,
Firefox.
Google Chrome.
This is Internet
Internet
Explorer.
Explorer.
Edge browser.
It is replaced by Edge browser nowadays, right?
Yeah.
Now different users may be used. Can you list out some more important browsers? What are the other browsers in the market?
Mozilla Firefox.
This is Mozilla Firefox, isn't it?
Okay. Sorry. One browser.
One browser. Brave browser. There is some browser called Brave browser. You did everyone hear that? What is the specialty of
Yes,
the
sir.
Brave browser? It has some unique thing. It has some special thing. What is the unique thing with Brave browser? It doesn't allow any ads in the
Yeah, sir.
right? So let me show you that. This is Brave browser, guys. And a few other browsers. There are many browsers in the market. Can you list out some more browsers? Safari, right? Netscape Navigator. Yes, you might have heard this, right? Safari browser,
Yes.
Netscape Navigator. Yes, are you with me?
No,
Yes, sir.
sir.
Okay, you can note it down.
DuckDuckGo.
What is that?
DuckDuckGo is
DuckDuckGo. Okay, I didn't hear that. I'm not
Yes.
aware. Okay, so the specialty of the unique thing about this Brave browser is, observe here. So it will block the ads, right? Suppose if you let me take you to some site now. Let me go to Ntr, right? And any website will display some advertisements, right? See here, there is one advertisement here. Okay, on the left and right side you see some advertisements, right?
Yes,
Some
sir.
serial advertisement.
Yes,
Right.
sir.
Now, if you use the same website, if you access the same website in Brave browser, observe here. Is it displaying any ads? Observe here.
No,
It is showing
No,
just.
sir, no.
no, sir.
It will not display any ads. Okay. It will basically, your Brave browser will block all the ads, advertisements and trackers. Observe here. Here you can see 2341 trackers are and ads are blocked in this browser, and this saves a lot of bandwidth. Time saved is 2 minutes 6 minutes. right? So this is the specialty of Brave browser. Okay, basically it will not allow. Okay, so someone told this DuckDuckGo, right? What is this? I think DuckDuckGo is a search engine for Brave browser. Is it a search engine?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's a search engine, right? Internet search engine that emphasizes protecting searchers' privacy. Okay. What are the different search engines in the marketplace? Guys, what are the different search engines?
Google.
Chrome.
Google search engine. Google search is one search engine.
Opera.
Yahoo also has its own thing. And
Opera.
Microsoft has one search engine. What is that?
Yeah.
Bing. Bing is the search engine for Microsoft, developed by Microsoft. Right? And the one that you mentioned, DuckDuckGo, this is the search.
Edge browser is from the latest one from the Microsoft, and then Firefox also
Right.
has.
This is the Edge browser, right? You see here, right? Microsoft Edge. Remember these icons, guys. Okay. This is the Edge browser, and if you observe here, default search engine will be Bing here. The default search engine will be, suppose you search for something here, right? You search, okay. Let's say, for example, performance testing. I'm searching for something, right? So, and if you observe here, this is the default search engine for Microsoft browsers. Okay. Clear, guys? Microsoft
Yes,
Bing
sir.
is the search engine. Okay. Now,
Yes, sir.
okay. Next. So, we will be using any browser, right, to access the internet or to access any application. We may be using different browsers, right? Whenever you access any website, right, from the browser, your request will first go to a server called web server. Okay, web server, and then if required, the request will go to application server and database server only when it is required. Now we will so if you send a request for let's say for example gmail.com. Okay, I'll close this and open a new one. All right, so let me close a new browser, and what I will do is I'll open. I think I have introduced developer tools to you, right? Previously, in one of the previous sessions.
Yes, sir.
Right. So let me show you something. Okay. So suppose you type gmail.com. Let me close the bottom part. It is showing some server name. Observe here, server SSFE.
Yes,
Right?
sir.
So your request will go to one. Let me observe here. What is SSFE?
Static file front
It is
end.
a proprietary web server software that Google uses for its web infrastructure. Right? SSFE is a proprietary web server. Right? So it is a web server that Google uses for its web infrastructure. Okay, let me show you some, let's check for some other websites. For example, irctc.co.in. All right, so let me send this request and see the main request. Click on that main request, irctc.co.in. Okay, so click on this. If you click on the main request, right, it will show you the web server name that irctc uses. Observe here. What is this engines? There is something called
NGINX.
engines. It's pronounced as engines.
Okay.
Okay. And now what is this engines? Engines is a web server. So if you search like what is engines? What is engines? What is this engines? See here. It is an open source software for web servicing. Here it is, right? Engines is a web server that is a web server, right? We don't want all the other explanation. So just, for now, let's, understand that all your requests, all these requests, for example, right? So all these requests will go to something called web server. Is it clear, guys? We are sending a request from the browser and your request will first go to the web server. Is it clear or no?
Yes, sir.
Oh, sir.
Now there are different web servers in the market. We have Nginx web server, we have Apache HTTP. There are different types of web servers in the market. Okay. Apache HTTP, Nginx, these are the most popular web servers. Okay, I will explain these in detail. What are the, I will explain in detail what are the different web servers, app servers in the market once we complete the tools, right? Once we complete scripting, then I'll explain like what are the different web app and DB servers in the market. Okay, so when I cover this server side monitoring. For now, as we came across that discussion, let me quickly show you what are the different web servers, application servers, and database servers in the market. So these are the different, here you see web servers. In web server category, we have Apache HTTP is a popular web server, and Nginx is the next popular web server, right? So HDFC Bank or IRCTC, they use Nginx as the web server, right? And Apache HTTP is another web server which has 40% market share, means 40% of the applications uses Apache HTTP as the web server. And Nginx has 23% market share, means after Apache HTTP, Nginx is the most popular server. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Now, these are application servers. Now, what is the difference between web server and application server? Let me explain that. Okay. Suppose you are sending, observe here. So we read the description, observe here. SSFE is a proprietary web server software. And what does SSFE stand for? Static file front end. Static file front end. Okay. Let's understand what is this meant. What is meant by this static file, or what is meant by static content. The first time you access Gmail, right? If you open an incognito browser, private browser, did I explain what is the difference between a normal browser and a private browser? Observe here, I started a private browser or incognito browser. How to start? See, this is a normal browser. Okay, this is a normal browser. And how to start a private browser is in Chrome. You have to use this option, new incognito window. And this is called private browser or incognito browser. Okay, so in the same way, this is a normal Edge browser. Now, if you want to open private window, so this is how we start private window. And observe here, the background color will be in black for private windows. Clear? Or a private browser. Suppose if you launch Firefox, this is normal Firefox. Okay, this is a normal Firefox browser. Okay, you see this icon, right? You can remember that. You can recognize that, isn't it? Right? Now let me show you private window. What is private browser? Okay, see, observe here. With Firefox, right? You see this icon, incognito, right? You see this incognito, sorry, private, right? Private window, observe here, private window, right? Now let's understand what is the difference between a normal browser and a private browser. First, I will start with Chrome. Okay, so how to start a normal Chrome browser? So this is a which one is this, guys? Is this a normal browser or a private browser?
Private browser.
Private browser,
private
sir.
browser. Observe here on the right side, you have it is showing as you are incognito, means you are using a private browser. Now let's understand what is meant by a private browser. Here itself, there is no rocket science here. So it's mentioned here, it explained here clearly. You have gone incognito. Now you can browse privately, and other people who use this device won't see your activity. Okay, suppose you access some websites and you close the you close the laptop and you go away, or else you did not lock the laptop and you go away, right? Okay, if you close the browser, right, other users cannot see your activity, whatever websites you have accessed, other people will not be able to know in your absence. Understood or no? This statement understood or no?
Yes, sir. Like history or telling, sir.
Yes, this is about history. I am coming to that. Suppose if you go to this, right? If you go to a normal browser and suppose you access some websites, right? And if you want to you left the laptop unattended, okay? You forgot and you left the laptop unattended. Now, if you observe here, if you go to, there is some in normal browser, there is something called history tab. Observe here, right? So if you go to history tab, it is showing what all websites I have access to here. See here, Gmail and this PPT, Google Slides and Google Sheets, YouTube Studio, WhatsApp, Facebook, and all this, right? Your normal browser saves your browser history. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Whereas if you go to a private browser, right, observe here, there will not be a history tab at all, because private browser will not save your browser history, browsing history. That's why you don't have a history tab option at all here. Clear, guys? So this is called, that's why this is called as a private browser. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Right? And however, downloads, bookmarks, and reading list items will be saved. Okay, leave it. You can ignore that. This is the important thing that you need to understand. Chrome won't save the following information: your browsing history when you are using private browser. By the way, right? Chrome calls that as incognito. Edge calls that as private, in private, and Firefox also calls that as in private. Let me show you in Firefox also. Firefox also calls that as private window. And again, observe here the description. Firefox clears your search and browsing history when you close all the private windows. Clear? It will not save the browsing history. Once you close all the private windows, it's gone. No one will be able to see what websites or what applications you have accessed. If you use a private browser, is it clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Now, there is a catch here. Okay, it doesn't mean that it doesn't save the browser history. Means, first let me complete this. When you are using incognito, your browsing history will not be saved. Cookies and site data will not be saved. Right? We came across a new term called cookies. This would be the assignment for you today. What is meant by a browser cookie? Right? Explore on your own, and tomorrow one of you will be not one of you. I'll ask like 4 to 5 people to explain what is meant by a cookie. Okay. Yes, this is browser cookies, guys, not Britannia cookies, right? So explore, this is a DIY exercise, do it yourself exercise. Okay. I'll share this document also with you, your running notes document also with everyone. Okay, wherein, or else, I'll be creating a Google Classroom and I will be giving assignments over there. Okay. I'll do that here. If time permits, I'll create a Google Classroom and I'll share the assignment. Otherwise, this would be the assignment for today. What is meant by cookies, or what are cookies? Browser cookies, or what are cookies in internet? Okay. This is, what is this, guys? DIY, do it yourself exercise for today. For Friday. Will you do that, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now, so whenever you are using incognito browser, right, cookies also will not be saved, and whatever information you entered in the forms, right, that also won't be saved. Means we see some registration forms or something, right? So whenever we want to register to a website, we fill our details in the form, right? First name, last name, and all this. That information also will not be saved, okay, in the browser. However, your activity might still be visible to websites you visit. Means your activity means whatever websites you have access to, right? The website itself will be able to track that. Or if you are using an office laptop, right, your employer will be able to find out that. Okay, so don't assume that if we use private browser, we can access any websites. So if it is your personal laptop, that's fine. But if you are using your office laptop, please remember that your employer or your network guy will still be able to track what websites you have accessed. Clear, guys? and your ISP, your internet service provider also will be able to detect. Okay. Only thing is like the websites will not be saved in the browsing history, and if anyone uses your laptop along with you, they will not be able to track those after when you are away from your machine. Is it clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Please note that, but still your activity will be visible to your employer. Means if you are using an office laptop or or if you are using your college network or school network or college network, right? The network admin will be able to find out like what are the, if you are accessing any unwarranted websites. Please note that. Okay. Now this is the difference between a normal browser and private
Sir,
browser.
last one, your internet.
ISP, internet service provider, means suppose if
Yeah.
you are using Geo, right? Or if you are
Okay.
using Airtel broadband or BSNL broadband, right? That is those
Okay.
are called as ISPs, internet service providers,
Providers. Okay.
or Act Fiber Net, right? That is one of the
Okay.
ISP, internet service provider.
Okay, sir. Thanks.
Now, so this understood what is the difference between a normal browser and a private browser?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now, why I am explaining this is I will be using this private browser frequently. Okay. Suppose, okay, let me, why am I using this, private browser is, suppose if I, in a normal browser, if I type gmail.com, right? Suppose in a normal browser, if I type gmail.com, it will directly take to my login page. Yes or no? See, it is directly logging in. Yes or no? Right? But if you are using a private browser, because why it is taking to your Gmail page? Because it saves the browser history, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
And it will take you to the whatever Gmail ID you are using frequently in the browser, it will directly log into that browser. Understood or not? However,
Yes,
if you access this private browser, as it doesn't save the browser history, right? It will take you to the login page. You observe the difference?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And if it is a normal browser, right? Let me open a normal browser, okay, from the beginning. Okay. Suppose I open a normal browser, normal Chrome browser, sorry. Normal Chrome browser, and suppose I type gmail.com. It will directly allow me to log in, isn't it? Yes or no? It is not asking for password and all. So it is, logging into Gmail directly. Understood, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
That's why I'm using private browser. I want to explain you something. Okay. That's why I'm using private browser. Okay. Suppose if you type Gmail here, see it prompts for this. It will ask you, or it will show you the login page, option for the login page. Close this, all this. I have one private browser here. First, let me go to the normal browser. From here, let me launch a private browser like this. Suppose you type gmail.com. It will not allow you to log in directly, isn't it? You are getting this page, right? So, and this is a static page. Means if you access a private browser, right, it will show either this page or this page. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
And this is a static page. So static page means Gmail will display the same page for you and me and any one of your friends, right? Anyone who is accessing Gmail, the first page will be this this page, login page, right? And you understood what is meant by static page? Means the page does not differ based on the user. Here, guys, right? And this static page, right, it will be served by the web server itself. Let me now go back to the architecture diagram. One second, please. Yeah, so no one will spend this much time on computer performance testing fundamentals, right? Explaining
Yes,
the
sir.
application architecture and all
Yeah,
this.
they have covered manual testing basics, and later on they have moved to performance testing, like the tool and all.
Directly they will start the tool in the first
Yes,
week,
yes,
third
yes.
class or fourth session. They'll start directly
For
with
the
the tool.
first 2 days, they'll start with functional testing. Mostly it is about the manual testing and the retesting, like types of testings and all.
Mhm.
Later on, directly they'll start with load and activity.
Right. Yeah. So right. So please utilize that. But generally, like I will be starting tool only after 7 to 8 sessions or 10 sessions most. I'll spend the first 10 sessions on performance testing fundamentals. Okay, and these are all basics like which every software testing engineer should know, whether it is a developer or manual testing engineer or a automation testing engineer or performance testing engineer should know all these basics. What is normal browser? What is private browser? What is developer tools? What is Fiddler? Right. So these all should be known first. Then and what are the different types of request methods? Right. So we'll discuss that in tomorrow's session. What are the different request methods? Right. Then if I start the tool, right, it will be easy for you. Okay. If you are good in these performance testing fundamentals, then scripting will be a cakewalk for you. Understood? Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
Yeah.
Right. So coming back to this, what is the difference between static and dynamic content? So this is static content. Static content means, what is the general meaning of static?
Fixed.
Stable.
stable.
Stable,
Meaning
sir.
of static. Static means which doesn't change. Right. Which does not change. Yes or no?
Yes,
Or
Yeah.
which is fixed. Right. So this is a static page, right? And these static content are for example, if you type even irctc.co.in, this first page is a static page. Everyone will get the same page, isn't it?
yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
But when you do a search, right? Suppose you search for trains between 2 stations, then is that a static page or a dynamic page?
Dynamic.
Dynamic page.
Dynamic page.
Right, that is a dynamic page, right? Suppose you search for 2 stations, right? This content changes, right? The trains details and ticket availability and all changes, yes or no?
Yes.
Ticket availability.
Right. So this is a dynamic page, isn't it? Dynamic content. You will have dynamic content, yes or no? Right. Now this dynamic page, or this dynamic content will be served by application server. Okay. Let me go back to the application architecture. All the static pages will be served by this web server, right? And if there is some processing involved, for example, what is meant by processing? So I searched for trains between 2 stations, these 2 stations, Bhopal and Bilaspur, right? So there is some processing involved here, and this processing will be done by application server, and all these details, right? So train details and availability, timings and all will be stored in the database server, right? Now your request will go to application server as well as database server whenever there is some processing involved. But if you simply type, if you access home page of IRCTC, let's say you access home page of IRCTC. So this is the static content. So this content doesn't change, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Understood, guys?
Sir.
Right? And this static content will be served by this web server itself, right? And how to confirm that? You can simply open. Just give me a moment. Someone is calling repeatedly, even though I'm not. I'm rejecting the call. Okay, right? So where are we, guys? So this is a you understood, right? What is the difference between static content and dynamic content?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now this and how do we know that this is served by the web server? Simply you can open developer tools, right? And send the request again. Type irctc.co. Okay, let me do one. Let me clear this first. Okay, and let me send the request again. Okay. Now, if you observe here, this is my main request, irctc.co.in. And suppose if you see here, the server is Nginx. And simply search what is Nginx. What is Nginx, guys? Web server. It's a web server, right?
It's a web server.
Right. So now it confirms that all the static content will be served by the web server directly. Your request will not go to application server or database server. That page, that static page will be there in the web server itself. And your request will go to web server. Web server will send the response to you, to the browser, right? So that's how it works. And now, if you search for something, if you search for some products in Amazon or Flipkart, or if you search for train availability in irctc.co.in, right? There is some processing involved in that, right? Then that request will go, web server cannot handle that. Web server cannot do that processing. It will send that request to application server. And observe here under application server, it's mentioned that this is logic tier or application tier, right? There is, if at all there is some processing involved, right, it will go to your application server. And now to process your request, right, if the application server requires some data which is stored in the database, now your application server will contact the database server. It will send a request to database server, and it establishes a connection with the database, get the data, right, read some data from the database, process that request. See, for example, if you search for 2 trains, okay, let me give some example. So if you search for trains between, let's say, Hyderabad to Bangalore, okay, now there will be some query running in the background like this. Suppose you search for trains between Bangalore and Hyderabad. So in the background, right, in the application server, there will be some code like this, SQL query like this: select star from trains table where source is equal to Bangalore and destination is equal to Hyderabad. I know, like, I covered this in the last batch. Accidentally I got that page, that same page when I opened Notepad++. Okay, so there will be some query, that will be run by the application server, right? And all these results will be, all these data will be stored in the database server. Actually, application server will not have those details, all the train details. Those details will be stored in the database server in some trains table, right? So your application server establishes a connection with the database, will talk to the database and run that query, execute that query, get the results, and sends the response to web server. Web server sends the response to the browser. So this is what happens when you send a request typically. Is it clear? Yes, everyone?
Yes, sir.
And now you understood why this is called as presentation tier and why this is called as application tier, and why persistence tier means, persistence means storage, right? So that's why database is called as persistence tier.
Yeah.
And you understood what is the difference between web server, application server, and database server?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, web server, there are 3 types of web servers. Yeah.
Web server?
Web servers, in this web server, there are 3 types of servers is there in.
In this diagram?
Yes, sir, it's in the architecture.
Huh?
Yes, sir, it's in architecture, it is showing 3 types of servers, web servers. What is this server?
Okay, this is, you are talking about, there are 3 web servers. What is this?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if one web server is, suppose, for example, IRCTC or any application for that matter, any application, right? So if it has a lot of user base, there are number of users who are accessing the application, right? They will do some, they will install, they will run this web server or this Nginx or Apache HTTP. They will be running on more than one machine, more than one box. Okay, so this is web server 1, web server 2, web server 3, and this is to balance the load. For example, if there is only one web server, let's assume that there is only one web server and there is some hardware failure over there, hardware failure, or there is some issue with that server. Now your complete application stops responding. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Right? So for that, they will do this something called clustering, server clustering. Means, so they will have some, they will be running the web server, that Apache HTTP or Nginx, on multiple boxes, or on the same server they will be installing 3 instances. Okay, box low, like they will be installing 2 or 3 or 4 instances. Okay, see, there are dotted line, there is dotted line in between. Ikkada 3 web servers unte prati application ki 3 untayani kaadu. It doesn't mean that, because you see there is a dotted line in between. So web server, 1 ఉండొచ్చు, 2 ఉండొచ్చు, 3 ఉండొచ్చు, or there can be 5 or 10 depending on the application, depending on the user load. Understood?
Yes, sir.
Right? So these are nothing but, ఏదైనా ఒక సర్వర్ ఫెయిల్ అయితే ఇంకొక సర్వర్ ఆ లోడ్ తీసుకుంటది immediately, or else ఒక సర్వర్ సరిపోకపోతే, if CPU and memory is not,
I have a query, can I ask?
Yes please.
Hello?
Yes please.
Nowadays, each and every project follows Ntr architecture, right? Is there any hello?
Yeah. Yes, most of the applications follow this 3-tier architecture.
Okay, okay. So, does any projects follow two-tier architecture? Kind of a small projects or any kind of thing?
Yeah, so if you have a desktop application, okay, for example, okay, this is one example of desktop application, Zoom meeting or Teams, right? It will, so we will have client installed on this machine and it will be communicating with the server, right? We won't use any browser here. So this is a desktop application. This is an example of a desktop application. Understood?
Okay, okay, Pawan.
Or else
Thank
if you
you.
are using Zoom client, right? So Zoom client, we can use Zoom as a browser-based application as well as a desktop application. Okay, but rather than using, see, browser-based Zoom has some certain limitations. Suppose if you are using Zoom in a browser, right, you cannot take control of the other machine. Okay, but if you install Zoom client, right, I can take control. I am using Zoom client. I can take control of your machine. If you also have Zoom desktop application, right? So functionality.
Functionality.
Hey, I'm hearing echo of my voice. I'm hearing echo of my voice. Okay, I don't know why. Right. So these are some examples that I already mentioned for desktop applications. Yeah. So coming back to your question, someone asked like, what is this? Why do we have 3 web servers? Understood, guys? If one server is not sufficient to bear the user load to serve all the users, right? They will install 1 more or 2 more or 3 more servers. Clear, guys?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
And in the same way, you have 4 application servers here and 3 database servers, right? And whenever you have more than one web server, or whenever you have more than one server anywhere in this stack, right, you'll have something called load balancer. And what is the job of this load balancer? It will distribute the user load between all the servers. The responsibility of load balancer is to distribute the user load between all the servers, available servers. 2 into 2, 3 into 3, 4 into 4. అన్నిటికీ యూజర్ లోడ్ ని ఈక్వల్ గా డిస్ట్రిబ్యూట్ చేస్తుంది. దట్స్ వై దట్ ఈస్ కాల్డ్ యాజ్ ఎ లోడ్ బ్యాలెన్సర్. క్లియర్ గైస్?
Yes, sir.
So let me go back to the next slide. Any queries here? See, observe here, most common architecture widely deployed. 3-tier shared nothing architecture is like it most common architecture and widely deployed. Gold standard developed as a result of web revolution, right? And problem is designed primarily for HTML web browsers, not mobile apps. Okay, mobile apps will have a different architecture, that is out of scope here. But this is the most common architecture and widely deployed architecture. Okay, now, so shall we move to the next slide?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Now let's understand like what is this presentation layer made up of, what is this logic tier made up of, and what is this database tier made up of, right? So this web presentation tier or presentation layer will be developed using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript mostly, right? Of course, we have latest technologies now like Node.js, and there are a lot of UI technologies now. But I know that I'm explaining the common or commonly or generally used usage of this or development of this presentation layer. So any presentation layer will be generally made up of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, what is HTML, guys? What is HTML?
Hypertext markup language.
Right. HTML stands for hypertext markup language. All your web pages will be developed mostly with this HTML, in this HTML language. Okay. Let me open some other browsers like bigbasket.com. Right. Or if you take any website, right? Sorry. If you take any websites as such, so all these applications will be developed in a language called HTML, most of these languages, right? HTML, and it is developed using a combination of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now let's understand what is this HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and how to confirm that, how to verify that is, if you right click and view page source, right? You see here HTML, right? It starts with, see, the document type is HTML, means this web page is designed using HTML language. Document type means this document or this page is designed using HTML. That's what it means, guys. See here, doc type HTML means. Now, so, and apart from that, like I mentioned that in this diagram, we have something called CSS and JavaScript, right? So let's understand what is that CSS and what is JavaScript. So CSS stands for cascading style sheets. Okay. CSS stands for cascading style sheets. Here it is, right? So, and what does this cascading style sheets does? CSS describes how the HTML elements are to be displayed. Means now what is this here term here? HTML elements. We came across something called new term called HTML elements. What is meant by HTML element? Suppose you have a text box here. This is one element. And you have a search icon here. This is one element. Or you have a logo here, right? Or you have, different tabs here, right? All these are called as an elements. Or suppose if you click on login button, right? So you'll get some, some text field and a button to click, right? And a continue button and a login button. This is one HTML element and this is one HTML element. So in HTML terminology, each of these different components, they are called as elements. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Now,
Clear,
what
sir.
the CSS does is, it describes how the HTML elements are to be displayed. Means, describes how the HTML elements are to be displayed. For example, so you should see this, this tab in a green background, right? That will be written in the CSS file. Or you should see a search box in the middle of the page, and on the left side you will see a big basket icon, right? Logo here always, right? And that will be defined in the layout will be defined in the CSS file. అంటే ఒక ఇమేజ్ ఎక్కడ ఉండాలి, ఒక టెక్స్ట్ బాక్స్ ఎక్కడ ఉండాలి, ఆర్ లాగిన్ పేజ్ వెళ్ళినప్పుడు బటన్ ఎక్కడ ఉండాలి, ఏ కలర్ లో ఉండాలి, బ్యాక్గ్రౌండ్ కలర్ ఏమి ఉండాలి, ఇవన్నీ that will be, all these will be defined in the CSS file. Understood, guys? What is meant by describes how HTML elements are? Is this statement understood now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right? And CSS defines the layout of the page. Layout means a element, a HTML element ekkada undali anedi, that will be defined in a CSS file. Now let me show you some CSS files. Where are the CSS files? I did a control F koti, I'm searching for CSS. Okay, see here, header.css.svg. There will be a lot of CSS files. See here, critical CSS. Okay, and you have some more CSS files, all.min.css, vendor.min.css, right? You see a lot of CSS files, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any page contains more than one CSS file. It can contain more than one CSS file or a single CSS file, right? And what is the purpose of CSS files?
Style.
They define the layout of the page, or they are called as cascading style sheets. Style sheets means they define the style of the page, or they define the layout of the page. Clear, guys? What is CSS?
Yes, sir.
Right? And third component, we have one third component called JavaScript, right? Here in this diagram, we have something called JavaScript. Now let's understand what is the purpose of this JavaScript. Okay, so JavaScript is used mostly for client-side validations. Let me go back to the slide. Explain that here in the another slide. So JavaScript is the programming language for the web. It can update and change both HTML and CSS. And the important thing is it does client-side validations. Means it can calculate, manipulate, and validate data. Okay, let me explain what is this, what is meant by this client-side validation. Okay, let me explain what is this client-side validation. Suppose you type irctc.co.in, right? And for example, here you search. So in the search box, you are supposed to select a city. Instead of that, suppose you select some numbers like this. You type some numbers like this. Doesn't make any sense, guys? Does it make any sense, like searching from some numbers, or some improper
No,
text,
sir.
proper cities? right?
No.
So if you
No.
type some, if you type some invalid data into any text field, or else if you take Gmail example, let me take Gmail example, okay? Once you click on sign in, right, here you have to enter either your email address or phone number. So instead of that, suppose you type some junk characters like this, some special characters like this. Does it make any sense, guys?
No.
No, sir. No, sir.
This is an invalid data, right? Suppose if you click on next button, right? So this email, this whatever string that you entered, right? It will not go to the Gmail server to validate. అంటే ఇది valid email address కాదా అనేది సర్వర్ కి Gmail సర్వర్ కి వెళ్ళి రాదు. This validation will happen on the browser itself. This validation will happen in the browser itself, right? That's why it is saying here enter a valid email or phone number. Okay, so this is called as client side validation or browser side validation. And this all this like for example, if you have a calculator application, online calculator, for example, okay, right? Suppose you enter some like okay, I think this is not a right example. Anyways, this example is understood, right? I'll give some more examples if you want. This is understood, right? So
Yes, understood.
what is meant by client side validation? Client means browser here. Browser is the client here for us, right? And these validations will happen on the browser itself, right? And that code will be written in JavaScript. Understood now what is the purpose of JavaScript? JavaScript is used for client side validations.
Yes, sir.
Right now, so all this HTML, CSS, JavaScript make together the presentation layer. Now coming to the next layer, that is logic tier, right? I'll close in 10 more minutes, guys. Okay, so coming to the next layer, that is logic layer, right? So this will be this one we are talking about, this one, logic or application tier. Okay, this layer, this will be developed in this layer will be developed using any of these languages like Python or Java or PHP or .NET or Rails and any other programming language. Okay, and the last layer is persistence tier, and this are database layer. So and there are different databases in the market like MySQL. MySQL is an open source one. That is the mostly used database because it is an open source, free to use. And then comes like Oracle, Microsoft SQL, PostgreSQL, and all this. These are the different databases in the market, right? So when you say database layer, it can contain any of these. That's what I mean to say here. It can be MySQL, or it can be Microsoft SQL, or PostgreSQL, or Oracle, or it can be a combination of more than one database also. Okay, in some cases we'll have a combination of databases. More than one database also may be there. I'll give some example when I cover real-time project training, right? I'll give you one example where we have PostgreSQL and MySQL, or PostgreSQL and Microsoft SQL, right? So
Yes, sir.
in the one of the real-time project that I explained, there are two databases, and I'll explain later like why do we have two databases, right? Why not one database there? I'll explain that when I cover the real-time project training, which I will be giving on weekends, guys. Okay, so and this is new Ntr architecture, and why it is called new Ntr architecture is, see here there are three tiers here: presentation tier, logic tier, and persistence tier. And here one more layer got added. Nowadays we have mobile browsers, right?
Yes, sir.
Right? So again in the browser side, like we have web browsers. If you are accessing any application from a desktop or a laptop, this is how the layout looks like. But if you are using a browser on a mobile, this is how the layout completely differs, right? So the some more layers got added. That's why they named it as I termed it as N tier. Okay, please remember this should be pronounced as tier, not tier. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So I'll stop it here for today, guys. Okay. So any queries before we close the session for today? This is it easy to understand, guys?
Yes, sir. Please.
right? So you should know, like, what are the different types of applications. We have desktop applications, browser-based applications, right? Before going into scripting, right? Know, like, what are the different types of applications, what is meant by application architecture, right? And what is meant by request, what is meant by response, right? You should know all this. What is JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, and all this. Then once you start scripting, right, it will be easy to understand for you. Whether we start with load runner or JMeter, right? We come across all these HTML files, CSS files, JavaScript files, and all this, right?
Yes, sir.
So that's the reason I'm covering all these fundamentals, guys.
Pawan, I have one question.
Yes, please.
Pawan, in the Ntr architecture, whatever you have showed there, can you please go to that particular slide, 32 slide number? The doubt what I have actually, see whatever the Nginx server and then the Apache Tomcat, whatever you have been explained so far. So these are all comes under that web server itself. But with respect to this Apache app server or something actually that comes under the some JBoss or something. So, but in production, do we have a separate web server and then app server, or a single server itself which will work as both the web server and app server, something like that?
No, most of the applications will have separate web server, app server,
Okay.
database server in production.
Okay.
Right?
So
Almost 99.9% or 100%, I can say, they will have web app and DB server separately. Okay. For example, that's what I told, right? IRCTC uses Nginx as a web server, and again they will use some application server, like it can be WebSphere or some Tomcat or WebSphere or WebLogic and so on. Okay. I have some screenshots. Okay, so let me here. See, I captured this screenshot on some fine day when IRCTC is not working, and it returned this page. Welcome to Nginx on Red Hat Enterprise Linux. If you remember, I mentioned in the previous sessions, right? Most of the servers will be running on Linux boxes. Did I explain that in your batch or some other batch?
No, not in our batch section.
Okay, maybe not. We did not come across that discussion. So observe here, when IRCTC is not working, right? So there is some technical issue with IRCTC, and I got this page. So just to show you, like, I took a screenshot of that. So if you observe here, welcome to Nginx on Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and Nginx is a web server only, right? There will be a separate application server like WebLogic or WebSphere or Tomcat. It can be any of these application servers or a JBoss, right? So, but in most of the applications will have separate web server, application server, database server separately.
Okay.
And in the same way, I captured one screenshot for HDFC also.
Okay. Did you update the IRCTC about this disclosure of information about the where server sits?
Yeah, right. So this is the plan, guys. Then, so as we discussed, like, I will cover performance testing lifecycle tomorrow. Today we are done with this application architecture and 2-tier and 3-tier architecture. Tomorrow I will cover performance testing lifecycle. On Sunday I will cover HTTP request methods, request response cycle, and then from Monday onwards we will be starting with load runner and JMeter. As we discussed, right? Those who want load runner can join. What is that? What would be the timing that I told guys for load runner?
7:30 to 8:30.
8:30. Right. So 7:30 to 8:30 would be for load runner, and 8:30 to 9:30 would be for JMeter. Okay. 7:30 to 8:30 for load runner, and 8:30 to 9:30 morning, guys. This is for JMeter.
Sir, ఇప్పుడు hello.
Yes.
సార్ ఇది ఇప్పుడు 7:30 to 8:30 లోడ్ రన్నర్ అండ్ 8:30 to 9:30 JMeter చెప్పారు కదా సార్ మీరు ఇప్పుడు. రెండు ఒకేసారి నేర్చుకుంటే బాగుంటుంది సార్, లేకపోతే సపరేట్ నేర్చుకుంటే కన్ఫ్యూజ్ అవుతాం, అలాంటి ఏమైనా ఉంటుందా సార్?
No, I cannot say that it's up to you, and it depends on you completely.
Okay.
Okay, let me close the recording, guys. So thanks for watching and have a nice day. Like, share, subscribe to my YouTube channel, guys. Okay, so if someone is interested to join live training, so from once we start the tool, we will not be uploading the sessions as public videos. So if you want to enroll for live training, contact the WhatsApp number that is being displayed here. Let me quickly show the contact number. Right. So please contact on this WhatsApp number that is being displayed here. Have a nice day, guys. Okay. So sorry. Good night.